Hi all, and welcome to the summary lecture for MGT604. This week, this is for managing in the global context, obviously, and this is for the week 8 topic. So today we are looking at international human resource management, utilization of that within the global context, obviously. This is specifically for the BM1 and B01 classes for us. This is to replace the lecture that was meant to take place today. My apologies that I got my wires crossed and I wasn't there for that. You have received a notification with regards to activities that you can undertake to catch up on that. There is a reading that you should read, and then a forum for you to answer a question on, and I'll give you some feedback on your answers there. Also, as well, if you would like to attend my class on Thursday, it's at 3:15 p.m, classroom 4 in the city campus. Feel free also to attend that, or if you'd like to, after the class, watch the video of that class. That will also allow you the ability to catch up on the material for this week. Although doing the activity, reading the slides and what we're going to go through here should give you a pretty good understanding of what we should have covered this week. I will say thank you for submitting your assessments last Sunday. We're currently working our way through those assessments, and we'll get feedback to you as quickly as we can. If you do have any questions to me regarding this activity that I'm proposing that you do this week on the forum, please feel free to email me. My email is on Moodle. You can see it pretty clearly, and also on this on the notification that this video is attached to. And if you have any questions about the assessment for us, we'll be back on Monday, and he'll be able to help you with those. All right, let's go through the subject matter. I'm not going to go through every single slide, but I will focus in on a few areas and just give a bit of a deeper explanation on a few areas. So, as I mentioned, we are looking at international human resource management today. So, as a company, nowadays, increasingly importantly, I think, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the proof of concept that people can work successfully from home, then there is this incredible flexibility that companies have come to understand, where they can have employees working all around the world. That's increased the desire to be able to hire people from around the world, but also as well, traditionally, if you are a multinational corporation, you've got offices located in other countries. Then one of the things you can do, obviously, is send staff from the head office to those other countries to work, and bring staff from those other countries to you to work as well. And that just increases the options that are available to you to really take advantage of one of your most important resources, which is obviously your human resources. So that's what we're looking at today. So this is topic 8, international human resource management. So reasons for international assignments, obviously filling key positions overseas. There are different options. We can obviously hire locals to do that sometimes, but there may not be the locals with the requisite skills that we need to fill those positions. We may want people in our head office to understand how overseas offices function and run, to be able to manage better. We might want to bring in some really skilled talent from somewhere else to go work in those offices. So there's all sorts of options available to us, which just increase the ability for us to be more strategic, to achieve better outcomes in our international human resource management. It can allow us to generate and transfer knowledge, as it says here, to develop leadership skills among our staff, especially if we're a multinational corporation. This means leadership skills not just in the moderately generic atmosphere of the head office, but also in an international context as well. And we've talked throughout this course about the concept of cultural intelligence, certainly a way of increasing the cultural intelligence of the leaders in our company. Developing the organizational structure as well. So we've got our domestic HR, we've got our international HR. For that, we have domestic human resource management. So what we're talking about is domestic is the parent company and the HR department within the parent company that is running human resources within the parent country where the company is located. And then the international human resource management. This can be a sub department of the domestic HRM that deals with international placements, or obviously it can be the office's HR overseas as well, or a combination, most likely of the both. So differences and similarities between domestic and international HR. Domestic HR deals with diverse workforces in home country, in such areas as selection, obviously, adaptation to company, training, development, evaluation, promotion, compensation, and communication. So pretty standard stuff that you would think about what HR deals with. Very, very important to understand the logic of what's the company trying to achieve? What are the HR needs that we have to be able to achieve these goals? Even potentially the question, this is where something called strategic human resource management comes in, where we can say, well, how can new strategies within HR for our company give us new opportunities, new capabilities that we hadn't necessarily thought of before? So HR is becoming more than just a kind of fulfillment of resource requirements. It's actually moving into the strategic area, certainly in the last 15, 20 years. That very, very important domestically, arguably even more important in the international perspective. International HR management deals with the multinational workforce, which is obviously the workforce from the parent company moving across borders. Addresses a broader range of activities, including complex aspects like international taxation, forex, foreign exchange, translation, and relocation. We'll discuss this in a lot more detail next week, this idea of sort of successfully relocating our staff overseas, and then even bringing them back can be a very complex and very, very expensive process. So there's a massive commitment by the company when we undertake international HR, when we start moving our staff members around and overseas, and with that comes a large risk. And there is quite a high failure rate of people being moved overseas and that not being successful. You can even get these situations where you spend a lot of money and time developing someone to move overseas, and after 2 or 3 months, they either want to come home or they leave the company. And then that's been a massive cost with obviously not very good strategic outcomes. This deals with foreign employees and is more involved in expatriates' lives, to the extent that they want us to be. So if we're expatriating a staff member, we're sending them overseas to work, then we want them to be successful. To do that, we would do a lot more for them in their personal lives than we would usually do, obviously, in a domestic situation. Again, it's optional. A lot of this stuff is optional. It's saying that we can help you, for example, help your partner find a job. We can help you find a school for your children. We can provide you with a support mechanism. We can help you find a property to live. Those sort of activities that we wouldn't usually do for a domestic staff member, we can do for an international staff member because we want to increase that likelihood of success. Certainly more concern about the risks of international assignments, things like health and safety of the employee. We're sending employees to certain places around the world. They can be a lot more dangerous than the country that those employees come from, especially from Australia going to other countries, because Australia is an incredibly safe country. There are other countries around the world that are less so. And so, we have a responsibility, a duty of care for the health and safety of our employees. So ensuring that our employees are safe and well looked after when they go overseas. And it deals more with external cultural factors, obviously. This is something we've covered all the way through this course, but culture becomes that much more of a factor. When we're sending an employee overseas, we need them to be able to settle into that environment. And so they're immersing themselves in a new culture. We need them to understand how to navigate that culture, that cultural environment well. And that onus is on us if we want a successful integration of that employee into this overseas environment. So defining international human resource management. There's performance management, there's training and development, there's industrial relations in different countries, compensation and benefits. Again, that can be quite a complex topic that we'll talk about in a bit. Human resource planning aspect of it, and effective staffing of all offices, including international human resource requirements. So what changes? To be honest, all of these things are still there when we go to international locations. It's just that they're going to be different from the the domestic location of the company. And so all of these considerations are still there. And, you know, if we're staffing our offices overseas with staff purely from the country that we have that office in, then yeah, we've got to learn all of these aspects of that country, you know, usually by hiring someone with skills, capabilities, qualifications in that country in these areas. Where it becomes even more complex is when we have to have that combination of staff who come from the parent country going then to a other location around the world, and then that combination of all of these factors doubled up for both of those places, basically. So staffing for global operations. Globalization has resulted in more businesses sending more talented people to the right place at the right time. And that's the thing. I mean, if I'm a corporation, there's a very important truth that companies have realized recently. That's this simple optimization aspect of the ability to run on a 24-hour cycle. What I mean by that is, if I'm a company based in Australia and I'm opening at 9 o'clock in the morning and I'm closing at 5 p.m., then I have that period of 9 p.m. to 5 p.m. to operate as a company. If I'm a globalized business, though, then that doesn't make any logical sense to only restrict my operation to that period of time, because that's including things like sales, including things like production and other aspects of service that the company runs, marketing and so forth, right? So why would I not, at a minimum, have offices around the world that allow me to operate on a 24-hour cycle? So, you know, a couple of other offices around the world located time zone wise at a point where the one office can hand over to the other. So, you know, it's 5 p.m. here is 9 a.m. somewhere else. And I'm not saying in that exact location, but somewhere near. So having that kind of crossover period allows companies to operate on a 24-hour cycle, to continuously operate. And therefore that can dramatically increase sales, you know, even potentially by 200% if we're successful in what we do. Technology, capital, information, raw materials could be multiplied or duplicated, but not people. And that's the thing. We can say, okay, we've got this here. This is what works here. Something quite similar should work over there. Let's just do the same. And that's quite easy when it comes to resources. Not easy, but not that hard. Where it becomes an awful lot harder is, well, we've got really successful people over here. How do we get successful people there? If they're the thing that are going to make us successful overseas, how do we get successful people over there? And if we're lucky, we might have a fantastic team that we can hire locally. But with the specific knowledge of how the company functions, that's probably not going to be the case. There's probably going to be the requirement for some of the members of our current team here to go over there and be a part of that office, certainly setting up and then maybe even potentially ongoing operations. So KPMG, for example, employs 155,000 people in 155 countries and has 3 lines of service: audit, tax, and consultancy / advisory. All right, so categories of international employees. This is important terms to understand here. So we have parent country nationals or PCNs. These are people who work for the company in the parent country that the company was founded in. Then you've got host country nationals. So we've opened an office, say, for example, we're an Australian-based company, we've opened an office in Singapore. Host country nationals would be Singaporeans working in that Singapore-based office. And then you've got third country nationals. That is someone from another country working in that host country. So say, for example, we've got a Malaysian employee working in Singapore for us as the parent company, then that is a third country national. So an American company wishes to appoint a new finance director for its Mexican subsidiary. It may decide to fill the position by selecting from finance staff available in its parent operations. That's sending someone from the US parent company across to work in Mexico. By recruiting a local finance expert in Mexico, that's hiring a Mexican employee to work in that role. Or sending a suitable candidate from one of its foreign subsidiaries. So say, for example, there's someone from the Argentina office who can come and work in the Mexico office. They obviously have Spanish as a first language, so that might work well for them to come in if they've got the requisite skills to be able to do that role. So categories of international employees. You've got parent country, HQ operations. So for example, Microsoft HQ, it's an American employee, is a parent company national. Then you've got a subsidiary company, say for example, in Mexico, the Mexico office of Microsoft, that's a host country national. Then you've got a subsidiary operation in Brazil for Microsoft as well. And you've got a Brazilian employee there. They're a host country national, same as with the Mexico office, but then you've also got a Mexican employee working there. They're a third country national. So ethnocentric staffing approach, different staffing philosophies that we could undertake. When firms fill key managerial positions, then we might say, if we're taking an ethnocentric approach, we want to take people from the parent country, and for those managerial positions, especially leadership positions, we want people from the parent country to go work in those positions. And it might not be any sort of discriminatory approach. It might simply be that we're a very young company. We've got a very specific and quite niche culture. The people who have grown up with the company since startup phase really understand that, and the thing that makes the company different and lightning in a bottle to a certain extent. So as we are establishing these offices around the world, to try and establish that same sort of culture, we're taking people specifically from the parent country, and we want to seed them in these locations to build the culture. And then we can certainly reconsider this later on. It could be that kind of approach. There's a polycentric staffing approach when firms fill key positions with local managers. We could take the approach that, well, local managers are going to understand the local market a lot more. So yes, there's a cultural aspect. We can train them in the culture of the company, but we want to get those host country nationals working in those leadership roles, because people who work for them, they're going to understand those people are going to be able to understand them. They're going to have a good understanding of the local market as well. We could have a regiocentric staffing approach where recruiting is done on a regional basis. So we don't need that specificity, especially if the office is not just producing a product for that local market, but for the region. Then it actually might make more sense to have that regional person as a leader, because they wouldn't just be dealing with people from the host country. They'll be dealing with people from that whole region. So then it might make more sense to have someone from one of the other environments around that, the host country, where we're actually selling a lot of products, say, for example. And a global staffing approach, when the best managers are recruited regardless of nationality. So then we say, well, we're not actually focusing on whether they're parent country, third country, whether they're host country. It's not relevant to us. We just want to know how good they're going to be as a leader. That's the most important question. And anything else we can train them to do. Okay, so different approaches there. Again, very often it's different horses for different courses, and there's no sort of fixed approach. It's more a case of, well, what's the situation? What's going to work best in this situation for a company? So we've just been through these. Ethnocentric approach, subsidiaries are managed by staff from the home country. This can mean that there's a lack of qualified local nationals. There's a need to maintain strong communication with HQ. Early stages of acquiring a local company. Some of the disadvantages here, though, limits local promotion of host country nationals. That if I'm working in a host country office, I am a host country national, and I'm seeing that all the higher up positions are going to people from the parent country, then I'm looking at my career progression and I'm saying, well, how far can I go in this company if they're always going to be they're always going to be hiring people from the parent country to take those leadership positions. Can be a long time for adaptation for the parent country national. So they come into the country, they've got to then learn that market. They've got to understand it, understand the culture, understand the nuances of that market. And that's something that the host country nationals might have. The polycentric approach, subsidiaries are usually managed by local managers. This can be because it's cheaper. No need for parent country national adaptation. However, some of the disadvantages here, bridging the gap between host country nationals and host country nationals might be, parent country nationals and host country nationals might be difficult. There can be a potential loss of control. Limited career paths as well for host country nationals. Staff is recruited from a particular geographic region. Regional autonomy is permitted in the decision-making process. It's a transitional stage from ethnocentric to polycentric approaches usually. And then last of all, we've got that global approach that we talked about, makes a strong international executive team, encourages cooperation and resource sharing. However, the disadvantages here, there can be a high cost of expatriate training and location, which we will talk about. So there are slightly different, and actually governments of countries around the world have slightly different definitions of what makes an expatriate. Usually what we're talking about is an employee who's working on a temporary basis, residing in a foreign country. Many firms prefer to call such employees international assignees. Expatriate, there's a bit of a colonial heritage to that term. You know, what's the difference between an immigration and an expatriate? There can be some judgment aligned with that idea of saying, well, this person's an expatriate as opposed to an immigrant. So therefore, just to avoid that, some countries use the term international assignees instead. Expatriates can also be employees who are not, who are frequent flyers for short periods so as not to uproot the family. Certainly initially, actually, sometimes when we're sending people over, we might say, well, we'll send you there for, potentially even, it could be for the working week. So if I've got an employee in Sydney and I want them to work in New Zealand, especially in Auckland, for example, it's a 3-hour flight away. So I can send them there on a Monday morning, I can bring them back on a Friday night, and then at least they get to spend time with their family. With the location of Australia, obviously kind of out in the middle of nowhere, except for New Zealand, it makes it quite a lot harder. But if you think about, companies in Europe, for example, where you've got your neighbours very close, even within driving distance sometimes, then that can certainly be the case. 80% of large-size US companies have expatriates. Some 60,000 multinational corporations employ over 400,000 American managers around the world. An impatriate is the opposite of an expatriate. It's a person who has worked in the country where the company starts its business operations. Impats are used to provide a linking bridge between the company's HQ and local host subsidiary companies. Impats are managers with global experience. So that's someone, this can be fantastic for the company. If we've got offices around the world, we've got an expatriate employee we've sent to go work in another market. They've become really competent at managing in that market, and then we bring them back to head office, usually with a promotion to put them into a higher position in the company. And then they've got a deep understanding of that market. So that's what an impact is, coming back to our company to come work in the company. And we'll talk about that next week, actually, because there are, believe it or not, a lot of risks with doing that as well. Especially when people have worked for quite a long time in other countries, sometimes they're not too, they might think they want to come back, but they come back and then realize that they're not too happy about the process. So why expatriates? Global environments have changed the competencies leaders need in conducting business. Large organizations now expect staff to take up expatriate positions and to travel extensively. And employers recognize the value of recruiting personnel with cultural knowledge, the capacity to manage international relationships, and a culturally diverse workforce. That gives us that really broad perspective. And it is a bit of a young person's game. If you're married for many years, your wife, your husband has their own role. You've got children, those children are well established in school with a strong social network, then it makes it a lot harder to take those overseas roles. Whereas if you're not married, newly married, maybe with very young children, then it makes it a little bit easier to be able to go overseas and take those international roles. So most common selection criteria for expatriates, their technical and proficiency skills, obviously their experience in the company, personality factors as well. Obviously want someone who's going to embrace the idea of going to live in another culture, not someone who's going to be resistant to it, what you would call a xenophile. as opposed to obviously a xenophobe. Ability to work in teams, they've got to be able to work well with other people and ideally have high emotional intelligence as well as cultural intelligence, good leadership skills, willingness to go overseas, obviously, and also the family willingness to go overseas. If the family's very resistant, then that can scupper the whole idea initially, because the partner doesn't want to force their family into doing something they don't want to do. Great if they've got previous international experience. Any foreign language proficiency can be obviously very useful, and their knowledge of the country that they're going to, again, can also be very useful. So ideal place for expats. This is slightly old data, but some of the major places, obviously New Zealand, Germany, Canada, Sweden, Bahrain, Taiwan, and Singapore. Overall results, best countries: Singapore, New Zealand, Sweden, Bahrain, Germany, Canada, Australia, Taiwan, UAE, and Switzerland. The economics factors of it, Switzerland's got the highest cost of living in the world, and so you do get paid very well for working there. Singapore as well, quite high cost of living, but you do get paid well for working there. Germany, UAE, Qatar, some of these countries obviously have very low, if not no tax, so that can be a real attractive aspect of going to work there. For experience, a lot of people like to work in New Zealand, Spain, Singapore, Australia, Taiwan, Canada, Bahrain, Thailand, Mexico, Oman. And for family, Sweden, New Zealand, Singapore, Spain, Germany, Bahrain, Netherlands, Canada, Philippines, and India. So in conclusion, the international human resource management function is a vital component of the global strategy of every globalizing firm. Emerging markets bring complex challenges to international human resource management at all employee levels. Careful decisions regarding the appropriate staffing policy for foreign locations are crucial to the success of companies. And by employing international human resource management practices, the multinational corporation secures the effective management of foreign operations, fosters the expatriate's career, and enhances the success of corporations. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that quick summary and delve into a few of the topics of the slides from today. Please undertake the activity now, post your response on the forum, and for us, we'll see you in class next Monday.